Good evening, everyone. This is Ramin Azarm, owner and operator of Flex to Success Clinical Rehabilitation Services. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and today I'm doing a video on the reasons why people overdo things. So, many times, the reason why people overdo things is because of past trauma. And what do I mean by trauma? If you've been abused or mistreated in your childhood, there's a significant chance that you are going to be a perfectionist and try to go above and beyond extremely excessively to the point where you actually damage yourself either physically through disease or illness, or your social relationships will become damaged because you will hyper focus in one or two particular areas a lot and then neglect other things in your life because of your desire to want to meet unrealistic expectations that you've set for yourself. So, what are some ways that past trauma can lead you towards excessively overdoing things or pushing yourself to the point of extinction? Well, relationships that broke your heart in the past. That's a big one. People who have a history of failed relationships where they were emotionally compromised repeatedly will often tend to go above and beyond and overdo things because they want to make up for the fact that they felt like a failure in those relationships. So they will stay extra hours at work. They will get abused by their future partners if their future partners are asking them to do things that they don't really want to do. They'll try and go above and beyond and do it and not communicate the fact that they don't want to do it because they said, well, I don't want to have another failed relationship. I don't want to have that unhealthy, uncomfortable experience repeat itself again. So I'm going to push myself and just do everything that I possibly can to avoid that negative, shameful feeling that I felt when, so and so left me. Another reason why people go above and beyond is fear of failure. Constantly telling yourself, I do not have the right to fail. I cannot fail. I will not fail. Refusing to fail, right? Guess what, guys? Life is full of failures. I failed at many things in my life. Some of those things I wasn't proud of, but in hindsight, looking back on it, I am glad that I failed because now I'm a better version of myself and I learned from my mistakes and I was able to live a better future as a result of those failures. And that's what you really want. You want to be able to learn from your mistakes. You don't want to avoid failure 100% of the time because if you never make any mistakes and you're never in a position where you screwed something up, then you can't learn from it. And if you can't learn from it, your knowledge base will never change and you'll never be in a position to do better in your life. So failure and mistakes can actually be a really good thing. It can give you the opportunity to be a stronger, better version of yourself by learning from those failures and learning from those mistakes. But too often, we tell ourselves, nope, failure is unacceptable. We can't fail. There's no way in hell we're going to be comfortable with the idea of failing. And we have to put up a wall and drive ourselves to the point of burnout so that we can avoid that failure at all costs. And too often people do this, and too often people end up failing anyway. But not only do they end up failing, but they also end up feeling like their negativity towards themselves is magnified because they were so abusive to themselves to try to avoid the failure that everything came to a head once they inevitably failed. So something to keep in mind, fear of failure can drive people to really scary levels of overdoing things. Another reason why people end up, driving themselves too hard is because they were criticized or rejected or ridiculed in their life. If that happens to you repeatedly, what it does, it creates a personality construct of feeling not good enough, of feeling inadequate. And then you spend the rest of your life trying to make up for that because okay, I don't feel adequate. I've been rejected my whole entire life. I've been ridiculed. I've been criticized. I've been told I'm a horrible person, I'm not good enough. So then what do? You spend the rest of your life trying to prove those voices wrong, right? Prove those people wrong that were saying that to you. And you will move mountains to try and do that because it's so shameful and uncomfortable. Each time somebody took the time out to attack you in that way, it was so traumatic and so uncomfortable for you that it becomes the cornerstone of everything that you achieve in your life. And that's really sad because in reality, like, we're all given our own lives to live how we please. And we should be achieving things and doing things because it makes us proud of ourselves, not because we want to make up for any criticism, rejection, or ridicule that we experienced either as a child or an adult. So, again, another thing to keep in mind for when you see people who are overdoing things or going above and beyond, you don't know what that person might have been through. They might have been really abused in their life. Another reason, being told you aren't good enough as a person. So that kind of plays into what we just said. You know, that feeling of not being good enough can just weigh on somebody's mind extremely heavily. Being negatively compared to other siblings or other people, the more you compare people to other siblings, a lot of times parents are guilty of this. They will, oh, well, you need to be more like Johnny. Look, Johnny went to university and Johnny got a good job and Johnny has a big house and Johnny has a Mercedes and Johnny has a Beamer, and how come you don't have one, and blah, 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 blah. Parents tend to be guilty of this, and when they do this, what it does is it just smashes their child's self-esteem because all the focus is on Johnny and how great he is. So then what in turn happens is that child who's being compared to Johnny feels like crap and loses the desire to want to achieve or do anything because they said, "Oh, I'll never be like Johnny, so why should I even try?" You don't want to destroy your child's spirit by comparing them to their siblings. That can really damage a child's self-esteem. It could damage their confidence, and it could really destroy their motivation. Being abused or mistreated is another reason why people go above and beyond. We kind of talked about that earlier. Being envied or despised for your achievements. You know, going to school and achieving a master's degree in psychology and then having your dad or mom tell you, oh, psychology is BS and it doesn't help anybody. It's a total waste of time. Parents do this. People can have strong opinions sometimes about something, but they don't always need to share those opinions. They can keep some of those opinions to themselves, especially if they're highly negative and inappropriate. I don't want to tell people that they can't have opinions about things, but you don't have to express it to people when it's not going to have any type of positive outcome, and if anything, it's only going to have a negative outcome, which causes that person to feel insecure or defensive. No reason to do that. Keep those opinions to yourself. So, causing harm to others or causing suffering to others, a lot of times, when this happens, like, people will try and make up for the fact that they hurt other people or make up for the fact that they cause suffering for other people. Um, I've seen this when I've done addiction counseling. I've counseled people who have had DWIs and they killed a family member of someone's, and they feel so guilty about it and so horrible about it that they spend the rest of their life like overly exerting themselves to try and make up for the fact that this horrible thing happened. But the only thing that ends up happening is they just run themselves into the ground until they get sick or die. It's like sad. And, they just don't realize that, okay, like, if you just find a way to forgive yourself somehow for what you did, you can stop overexerting yourself. You can stop feeling shame and guilt, or at least reduce it to some extent, and maybe like salvage some level of good quality of life, for the rest of the years that you're going to be on earth. That might even motivate you and encourage you to do public speaking events where you talk out against people who are drunk drivers and hurt others. You could speak out against drunk driving, period. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, like, running yourself into the ground is just gonna, it's a vicious cycle. You feel shame and guilt, so you run yourself into the ground, and then you feel tired and you feel more shame and guilt. it's a vicious cycle that just never ends. And then finally, like being left alone, abandoned, or frightened. So, if one of your parents or both of your parents left you at a really young age, and you had to make adult decisions as a child, and you felt that intense level of pressure to problem solve and do things to either help yourself or your siblings because your parents or one parent or both parents abandoned you, that's something that can really drive people to go above and beyond excessively because now they've been put in this position where they have to exert themselves and they have to learn things at an extremely fast rate and problem solve and now at this point it's for survival. So now it's part of your upbringing to acquire this unrealistic expectation, this crazy view that you're supposed to be an adult in the body of a child. And that will carry on into adulthood and you'll be that adult who's pulled their back out and has like pulled discs in their back and they're like doing flooring and then scrubbing floors and going home and crying at night because they're in so much pain and then like pulling their back out ending up in the hospital and then it's just, I mean, it's sad what people will do to themselves because they just feel shame and guilt and they have no insight to understand that like they're abusing themselves because they were abused by other people. Um, so this is my video on people who overexert themselves. Ways that you can counteract overdoing things or abusing yourself in this way is you can be realistic about the expectations that are upon you. What can you realistically do? What can you realistically accomplish? Understanding what your limitations are. Listen, there's going to be things that you're good at. There's going to be things that you're not so good at. Knowing yourself and knowing like where you stand on certain topics, on certain fields, certain levels of education and expertise. Being able to be realistic about that and level set with yourself and say, okay, I can commit to this, I can't commit to that. That's super important. Also, maybe acquiring a therapist, um, venting out some of these past traumas that happen can. You'd be amazed how quick it could turn your life around, and motivate you and drive you towards really getting a handle on how to balance things better. Um, as somebody who pushes themselves to the brink of extinction, there's a really good chance that you haven't found balance in your life. You haven't been able to understand that, things happen when they're ready to happen. Um, you can acquire a very controlling and domineering personality if you're somebody that drives themselves this hard all the time. You have a tendency to think that you have control over things that you don't have control over. Sometimes natural disasters happen. Sometimes you can't do what you want to do. Sometimes you can't go above and beyond. Sometimes you have to fail. Sometimes that choice is taken away from you. And, you shouldn't beat yourself up over that. You should just accept it. You should accept that, there are going to be times where you fail. And then you can always plan for the future to do things differently so that that particular issue doesn't become a problem again. Use your failures as a learning opportunity. Don't allow them to create more guilt and shame for you because then you will just drive yourself towards being more and more of an excessively overdoing it type of person. And there's all types of bad things that can happen as a result of that. People get divorced when they consistently overdo things. People damage their social relationships. They become irritable and grouchy and moody and angry. Um, People end up failing at their jobs. They end up failing in their relationships. They end up failing with their friends. They end up failing with their families because, if you're just excessively trying to overdo things all the time, you're human. So once you burn out, guess what? The opposite's going to happen. Like you're going to poorly perform in all those areas because now you've spent yourself and wore yourself thin, and you don't have the ability to go above and beyond anymore. You've ran that into the ground, and now it no longer exists. Now your body's screaming, "Help me recharge, rest me, allow me to, you know, allow me to gain some rest and relaxation so that I can recharge." And somebody who overdoes things all the time, they're not going to give their body that opportunity. They're not going to give their mind that opportunity to kind of recharge and clear. They're just going to keep going and going and going. And what that does is it leads to a breaking point. And once you hit that breaking point, you know, I mean, anything could happen at that point. I mean, you could realize the error of your ways and make changes and you could be fine, or you could have a heart attack, and or even at a worst case scenario you could end up, you know, deceased. So, you know, it's a real thing. It happens. People, you know, it's a very common thing that happens in our society. That's why I decided to do this video. And I just want to let people know, like, you have a choice. Like, you don't have to stay in the dark and just continue on the same path. If you're not happy with running yourself into the ground and overexerting yourself, then change it. You know, make the necessary changes that you need to make so that you can find that balance. And when you're in equilibrium, you're most likely going to be the happiest you've ever been. So it is worth it to search for it and try to acquire it. And just be conscious of, you know, am I making this decision because I'm functioning on guilt and shame, you know, for past traumas that I've experienced? Or am I making this decision because it's the right thing to do in this moment? You know, having that insight to ask yourself that question and really be honest with yourself is a way that you can kind of let go of some of these, you know, uncomfortable rules that you've set for yourself, such as, you know, I can't stop working until the work is done. Okay, well, if you've worked 15, 16 hours straight, you probably need a break. It's time to stop, you know. So that's my video. And, you know, if you guys have any questions or concerns, please leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit the like button. Also subscribe, and I will see you guys for the next video. Take care. Have a great night. Bye.